Thanks for staying with us now for the news in detail. We'll begin with our top story. The Indian Supreme Court is to today hear a petition against the crackdown and arrest of senior political leaders in occupied Kashmir. That motion was filed after the Indian government imposed a crushing curfew in the valley when it revoked Kashmir's special status on August 5th. The case will be heard by a three-member bench. Filed by activist and Indian Congress leader Tehseen Poonawalla, the petition calls for the restrictions put in place by Indian forces in the occupied territory. There are reports of the use of excessive force by 900,000 Indian troops as the lockdown enters day 9. Soldiers have fired live ammunition, iron pellets, and tear gas on Kashmiris protesting New Delhi's annexation of the valley. Well, the other power involved in the Kashmir issue is China, which has opposed India's unilateral annexation of occupied Kashmir and has told New Delhi to avoid provocation. That message was delivered by Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Vice President Wang Qishan in separate meetings with India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar. The Indian Foreign Minister is on a 3-day visit to China to get Beijing's support for its annexation of occupied Kashmir. The Chinese counterparts told Jaishankar that India's steps can trigger regional tensions and urged the issue to be resolved under UN resolutions. The Chinese leadership says it is concerned about the current situation and is closely following the developments. Beijing also says it opposes any unilateral action that changes the status quo in the Kashmir region. Well, after imposing a total communication blackout in occupied Kashmir, the Indian government will now silence voices on social media. New Delhi has asked micro-blogging website Twitter to ban over half a dozen accounts for sharing Kashmir news. This comes after the Indian government locked the valley under a crushing curfew after illegally revoking its status as a disputed territory. The BJP government has already issued gagging orders for electronic and print media. Kashmiris abroad still cannot contact their families during Eid because of India's clampdown in the valley. The valley is under complete lockdown for the 9th straight day as occupying forces fear strong protests after the revocation of Article 370. Staying on topic, the international media has slammed India's crushing clampdown in occupied Kashmir during the religious festival of Eid al-Adha. Kashmiris spent the festive day in a state of house arrest as no celebrations were allowed. The New York Times described the situation in Kashmir as a living hell of fear. The British newspaper The Guardian reported Eid in Kashmir was muted because India refused to allow any prayer congregation in the valley. The BBC, meanwhile, reported Eid al-Adha in occupied Kashmir was marked amid a complete lockdown. The Canadian newspaper, the Toronto Star, says India is on a dangerous path in occupied Kashmir. Turkey's leading media outlet, TRT, writes that New Delhi tightens the repression in occupied Kashmir, fearing protests from the people. Al Jazeera, for its part, said the occupied valley remained cut off from the world during Eid because of the communication blackout. The Independent reported major mosques in Kashmir remained closed as India's security shutdown continues. In other news now, Iran says the UK might soon free its oil tanker, the Grace 1, after both sides exchanged documents regarding that ship's release. Tehran's port ministry says the tanker was captured on the false pretext of smuggling oil to Syria. Iran's ports minister Jalil Islami says Tehran hopes the release will happen soon after the paperwork is complete. Gibraltar says it is seeking to de-escalate rising tensions with Tehran since the detention of the Grace 1. It says the current detention order on the vessel expires on Saturday night. Earlier, Iran's Revolutionary Guards seized a British tanker, the Stena Impero, 2 weeks after the capture of Grace 1, accusing it of marine violations. Tehran is still holding that tanker. Well, Iraq has rejected any Israeli participation in the U.S. naval coalition protecting shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. is rallying an international naval alliance to guard vessels in the Gulf after tensions with Iran escalated. Iraq's Foreign Minister Mohammed Ali al-Hakim says the Gulf states can secure the passage of ships together. He says Iraq will work to lower tensions in the region through talks because the presence of Western forces will increase conflict. Meanwhile, the British warship HMS Kent set sail for the Gulf yesterday to join the U.S.-led tanker escort mission. Germany, for its part, has refused to join the Pentagon's coalition, saying it will only fuel tensions, while Japan has expressed reservations over the move as well. In an interview, Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif called the U.S. coalition a threat to regional security. Well, over in Syria, government forces have taken control of 6 towns and several villages in northern Hama and south of Idlib province. The Syrian Observatory War Monitor says over 250 people have died in the fighting since the ceasefire collapsed on Saturday. War monitors say rebels have lost Al-Arba'in, Al-Zakat, Al-Sakhr, amongst other areas in Hama province. They say government forces have seized the hill of Sukaik, an important vantage point in southern Idlib, as they move on Khan Sheikhoun. Meanwhile, Russia says militants attacked 30 Syrian refugee camps in different regions of the war-ravaged country. The Russian Reconciliation Center for Syria's chief, Alexei Bakin, says settlements in Aleppo, Latakia, and Hama province were targeted. Well, on the other side of the border, a 6-member U.S. team has arrived in Turkey to finalize a safe zone in war-ravaged northern Syria. Turkey's defense ministry says the team will set up a joint operations center that will begin its work soon. Both countries struck a deal to establish the safe zone to manage tensions between Turkey and U.S.-backed Kurdish forces on the Syrian border. Turkey's defense ministry says Ankara proposed a 30-square-kilometer area as the safe zone. The ministry, though, says the U.S. has agreed to a buffer zone of only 15 kilometers, and negotiations in that regard are progressing. Meanwhile, Syria has rejected the safe zone altogether, calling it a violation of its sovereignty.
This is a dangerous precedent in international relations, that 2 countries agree on making maps and safe zones in a third country, because this is a violation of the sovereignty of the third country and an international law violation.
Well, Washington and Ankara have been at odds over those plans for northeastern Syria. Turkey says it will act militarily if the U.S. fails to agree to a solution to safeguard its border. Now, in other news, Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan has urged southern separatists to begin talks with the Yemeni government to defuse the ADEN crisis. This comes after rebels took control of Yemen's second city from President Abdurabu Mansur Hadi's forces. Meeting the Saudi King Salman in Mecca, Al Nahyan said the UAE and Saudi Arabia stand together against forces threatening regional peace. He said Saudi Arabia is a key pillar to regional security and stability. Meanwhile, the Southern Transitional Council leader, Aidarus al-Zubaydi, said he is committed to a ceasefire in the port city. Earlier, coalition forces threatened to launch a full-blown military operation against the rebels if they didn't withdraw from the captured areas. In other news, a humanitarian ship, the Ocean Viking, has rescued another 105 migrants off the Libyan coast from an overcrowded rubber dinghy. This brings the total number of migrants rescued aboard that ship to 356. French charities SOS Mediterranea and MSF have rescued the migrants, who are mostly from Sudan, including 29 minors. The recent rescue is the 4th in as many days. These rescues come at a time of tension between Italy and other European Union states. The Italian government is refusing to let migrants land on its shores unless the EU's partners help take them in. In Libya itself, flights have resumed from the capital Tripoli's sole functioning Mitiga airport as calm has returned to the city. This comes after a temporary truce was violated the previous day. Flights from Mitiga airport were suspended for several hours after a rocket fire hit the airport. The government has blamed Haftar's forces for attacking the airport. Earlier, Haftar's Libyan National Army and the government had agreed to a UN-sponsored humanitarian truce for Eid al-Adha. Matika is a former military airbase being used by civilian traffic since Tripoli's international airport suffered severe damage during fighting in 2014. Elsewhere, in Argentina's primary polls, President Mauricio Macri has suffered a crushing defeat against his left-wing rival Alberto Fernandez. With more than 95% of the votes counted, the coalition backing Fernandez got over 47% of the votes, while Macri received 32%. President Macri's defeat has raised serious questions about his chances of being elected again in October's general election. The result is being seen as voters' rejection of austerity measures introduced by Macri in a bid to stabilize the country's battered economy. Meanwhile, the Argentinian currency, the peso, lost 14% of its value against the dollar following Macri's defeat. Hong Kong's airport has reopened after thousands of flights were cancelled in the past 5 days because of violent protests. Over 200 flights still remain stuck. Authorities have advised travelers to reschedule. The Hong Kong protests are now in their 11th week. In a joint statement, Hong Kong's seven civil aviation unions have urged protesters to stop their illegal activities at the airport. Police have arrested 149 people accused of taking part in illegal assemblies and violence. The airport shutdown came as the Chinese government signaled it would link the protests to terrorism. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's carrier, Cathay Pacific, has warned its staff that they could be fired for supporting the protests. Leader Carrie Lam has defended police actions towards young protesters during the weekend's hit-and-run demonstrations. On to the U.S., which says it will deny citizenship to migrants who use public benefits. Action Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service Ken Cuccinelli says those already in the United States will not be able to obtain green cards. The Trump administration's decision aims to deny permanent residency to migrants who receive food stamps, Medicaid, and other public welfare.
Our rule generally prevents aliens who are likely to become a public charge from coming to the United States or remaining here and getting a green card. Public charge is now defined in a way that ensures the law is meaningfully enforced and that those who are subject to it are self-sufficient.
Well, this new policy for inadmissibility on public charge grounds will take effect in 2 months. The decision is part of the Trump administration's efforts to reduce immigration. Let's move on now to Russia, which says the 5 scientists killed last week in a rocket explosion were developing new weapons. Russia's nuclear agency Rosatom says it will continue testing until the end of the program despite the blast. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump says the U.S. is learning much from the missile explosions in Russia. President Trump says the U.S. has similar but more advanced technology. Trump says Russia's Skyfall explosion has people worried about the air around the facility. Rosatom says the rocket's fuel caught fire and exploded, causing a detonation on the White Sea coast outside Severodvinsk. Russia's state weather agency says radiation levels have risen 4 to 16 times in the city after that accident. Authorities have advised residents to take precautionary measures and use more iodine to reduce the effects of radiation exposure. In news coming out of Norway, the man accused of opening fire at the mosque near Oslo has denied allegations that he carried out an act of terrorism and murdered his stepsister. Police are seeking to hold Philip Manchos in custody for 4 weeks on suspicion of murder and breach of anti-terrorism. One person was wounded when the 21-year-old suspect opened fire on Muslims who were preparing for Eid prayers at the Al-Nur Islamic Center. Initial investigations showed the suspect appeared to hold far-right and anti-immigration views. Well, there's finally hope for Ebola sufferers. Scientists say the disease may soon be preventable and treatable after a trial of 2 drugs showed significantly improved survival rates. The U.S. National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases has said the drugs showed 90% survival rates in a breakthrough trial. The U.S. has developed the cure using antibodies harvested from Ebola survivors. Director Anthony Fauci says 2 of the drugs have shown highly effective results in treating the disease. Fauci says the drugs work by attacking the Ebola virus with antibodies and neutralizing its impact on human cells. Health officials say drugs will now be used to treat all Ebola patients in the Congo, where the disease has killed over 1,800 people just this year. Let's begin this segment of the bulletin in Lithuania, where an unusual treatment claiming to soothe pain and treat ailments is creating a buzz. The users of this therapy lie on beds over beehives. More details in this report. In Lithuania, bee therapy is becoming popular. People believe the therapy could lower blood pressure and ease breathing difficulties. Therapists claim they use energy created by bees flapping their wings.
I feel pain in my knee joint. It's like it is burning. Bees, it seems, feel a human's pain, and they take this and draw the pain out from the human.
Sidrunas Yapertas runs a bee therapy center in Lithuania. He says people come for different problems.
People resort to bee therapy for various problems: back pain, joint pains, to lower blood pressure, to recover from breathing difficulties, and so on.
He says he converted to this remedy after using it to ease his own back pain.
I got into bee therapy 7 years ago when I had some problems with my back. I was interested in bee therapy centers in Ukraine, and so I tried them out for myself. It helped to relieve my back pain, so I began to recommend it to others.
This method uses bee-related products, including honey, propolis, and venom, for a myriad of different ailments. Well, constellations of colors woven with fragrances have aligned themselves in the streets of the Colombian city of Medellin. The annual event celebrates craftsmanship of creating breathtaking floral arrangements.
Summer has come into full bloom as scores of florists descended on Medellin for a colorful flower festival. Celebrating the art of floristry, flower fanatics marched on the streets of the metropolis to show off their elaborate floral arrangements. Local families have dedicated themselves to flower production for generations near the flower-rich area of Santa Elena. Their highlight this year is a tribute to Colombia's first ever Tour de France victory. The parade dates back to 1957 when locals invited florists from nearby villages to march in the city. Winners for the best floral arrangements were announced at the end of the festival.
God rewards. I can't believe it. I did this Sileta yesterday with all my children and in-laws who helped me. I can't believe it in getting a prize. I knew what I was doing. I've been looking for it for many years and I've lost because of little things. I said the time will come and it will be perfect.
The people of Medellin, or Pesas as they are known, hope the flower fair will help restore city's image and replace memories of Pablo Escobar and drug trafficking.
Let's get started off with business news in Japan, where the Trade Minister Hiroshige Seko says Tokyo is in the dark as to why the South has downgraded their trading status. This comes after Seoul's decision to drop Japan from its fast-track trade whitelist. The South Korean Trade Minister Sung Yun-mo says it is hard to work closely with a country that frequently violates basic rules. South Korea stripped Japan's fast-track trade status following a diplomatic row. It has created a new category for members who are in the world's top 4 export control agreements but violate international trade norms. Japan is the only member in this list. Earlier, Tokyo removed South Korea from a list of favored export partners. Now, Asian and European shares have slumped over negative news from around the globe. Political uncertainty in Italy and Argentina, the Sino-US trade war, and Hong Kong unrest have compelled investors to take refuge in bonds and gold. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan and Chinese stocks has slipped 1%. Hong Kong's main market index stumbled 1.7% to a 7-month low. The Pan-European Stock 600 index fell almost 0.5%. Milan-listed shares were down 0.7%, hitting their lowest since June. Germany's DAX, London's FTSE, and France's CAC all recorded losses. Meanwhile, the yen traded close to a 7-month high against the dollar. This follows U.S. stocks dropping in a broad sell-off on Monday amidst simmering geopolitical tensions. Bundesliga champions Bayern Munich have defeated Energie Cottbus in the first round of the DFB Pokal Cup in Germany. Bayern took a comfortable 3-1 victory over Cottbus. Star striker Robert Lewandowski opened his season's account with a close-range finish in the 32nd minute. Forward Kingsley Coman and midfielder Leon Goretzka each added to Bayern's tally in the second half. Cottbus midfielder Berkan Taz pulled back a consolation goal in the dying minutes of the game. The second round draw, the will to take place this weekend. Remaining with soccer, the Netherlands' most capped player Wesley Sneijder has announced his retirement from international football. He played a record 134 matches in his 17-year-long career. Following his departure, Sneijder has signed a business deal with Eredivisie side Utrecht. The Dutchman started his career in Ajax's youth academy. He won the UEFA Champions League with the Italian club Inter Milan. The appearance record holder for the Netherlands has been without a club since his contract with Al Gharafa expired last month. Well, in England, the Australia team have won all 3 races at the Sale Grand Prix in the port town of Cowes. Australia are 4 points clear before the series' final event, which carries a prize of $1 million. The Aussies have also become the first crew to break the 50-knot speed barrier in the Grand Prix. They now top the table ahead of Japan and the United States.
Beautiful, actually. That last race was really nice. The water finally flattened out. We had big waves earlier, but it flattened out and we got some great racing.
Let's now find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thanks very much for watching this bulletin here at Indus.